I would like to invite my speakers on stage. I will present you while I speak so that we actually have time for the conversation. Yes, please join us. So I have today with me Alexandra Geese, the member of the European Parliament. Yes, a round of applause. A lot of good work has been done. We have Frank Karlitschek from NEXTCLOUD, the CEO of NEXTCLOUD. Double applause for the open source award that Frank received yesterday. Then we have Mr. Thibaut Kleiner from the European Commission, Director for Future Networks. We have Frank Feldman. They are not coming in the order that I have on my script. The Chief Strategy Officer at SUSE that we have heard from in the morning. And Mr. Ritesh Paiboina, Chief Technology Officer of the T-Cloud Public at Deutsche Telekom. So I'm very happy to moderate this session. It's not an easy one, honestly, because I feel like a lot has been said already today. I was really trying to find something that will bring a bit of a new quality, a bit of a new message. Somebody said today that we all more or less agree on this, and we should probably go a bit further, and we should go to different conferences and see some other faces and talk to people who don't necessarily agree with us. But I would like to start with Thibaut. We often define digital sovereignty as something that we have to achieve, but through switching and moving away from the US tech, from the Chinese tech. And we do like to regulate things in Europe. We often see it as a way to achieve those goals. And very often we have very good reasons for trying to regulate things. In the past months, I've heard not once from the Deputy Director General at Digit tell this anecdote about Jean Monnet that was saying that Europe was not built out of fear from the USSR, but out of belief in its own capabilities. And with this view on believing in our own capabilities, when you look at the cloud and AI in the 10, 15 years perspective from now, what kind of digital power Europe actually needs to regain and retain? And what is the positive, confident vision for that?
So it's always nice to quote Jean Monnet.
Right.
And he was also maybe a different generation of Europeans, I must say. I mean, sometimes I feel that we've had such a good life in Europe. And maybe we got also a little bit cozy and a little bit lazy with some of the important things you need to do to stand on your 2 feet and to be able to defend yourself, and also to be independent in terms of what your kids will be able to do and to get as a job. So if I look forward, you know, in the 10, 15 years, I think that I think we are at this junction where you know, our president, Ursula von der Leyen, speaks about independence. And I think that's as such an important goal. I mean, Europe needs basically to stand up, need to also explain that we have also a voice in the world. We have also a vision for how we see digital technologies, how they can be a force, a positive force. You know, we are today, many people say that, I mean, when I speak to my kids, they say that I was lucky not to grow up with social media, which I found a bit of a sad comment, actually. But it shows that, you know, there are issues we have not solved and that do not match necessarily the kind of social fabric we want. So for me, in 10, 15 years, I mean, it's difficult to predict because, you know, we have an acceleration of technology, but we have set out for Europe to be an AI continent, which basically means that we embrace the technology in a positive manner, but also we shape it in a way that will make our society better, more inclusive, where we use the technology for good, and where we not necessarily have a situation where we are becoming more and more the slave of the technology, instead of having technology to enhance our capabilities and reinforce the way we interact. So I think that's for me the vision, you know, to develop this AI continent, to have a kind of a situation where we use technology to cope with the challenges of society, not with fear, but because basically we need it and we can do it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I would like to see if our speakers would like to add something important to this vision from your perspective. We have, you know, we have some business people, we have the parliament. is there something that you see as an important concept that we have to include in this vision? Because we all agree that, yes, we want to achieve digital sovereignty, but why? And why can we do that through open source? I see Alexandra picking up the microphone, please.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I think that those are beautiful words, but the thing that is missing is the element we need to actually do that, because we're not doing it. We are saying it, but we're not doing it. And I think the element that is missing is courage. Because in this moment of time, you need courage to do that. Because if we want to create the conditions to really have real growth in Europe, to have sovereign solutions, which does not mean independent, there's no such thing as independence in the globalized world. But there is the possibility to see eye to your partners, or sometimes to your adversaries in this moment. And we are under threat. And you, in your quote, it was the USSR, and we are still under threat from Russia today. But today, there's also threats coming from the other side of the Atlantic, from the US, and I think that needs to be addressed, who do not want us to want to see us sovereign, who are boycotting this, who do not want to see us sovereign in terms of regulation, regulating our own market, but they also don't want us to build. So in order to turn that beautiful vision on which we all agree into reality, we do need courage. This is the moment really to go out and do that. And I agree that we shouldn't do it only out of fear. But you have to acknowledge there's the real threat to our democracy and to our economy, because through AI, American or Chinese AI solutions, we will be dependent. We will not achieve independence just because we adopt foreign solutions by powers who are clearly saying, we want to change the political regime you live in. So it's not about adoption of foreign AI, it's about building in Europe, and that kind of building in this moment takes courage. And that courage I would like to see, but not only out of fear, but also because of the belief that we do have the talent in Europe, we do have the companies. I mean, if you talk to the CEOs of cloud companies in Europe, they're frustrated. Because say, well, every time there's a public tender, I already know which American company it's been tailored to. And it's not the German company, it's not a French company. So I think this is the kind of courage the European Commission and the member states need to come up in the next month. We have the cloud and AI development, for example, coming up, but also when we look at the MFF, when we look at the investment environment, to say, you know, we're going to have that courage because we believe in Europe.
I believe there is a lot of courage in this room. I see that Frank wants to add something.
Yeah, I also wanted to.
Okay.
I also wanted to add that I find the term independence a little bit problematic, I have to say. For me, it's not about building a wall around Europe. This is not the goal. It's also totally not possible that everything is like built inside Europe. In Germany, there's this joke I hear sometimes that we should only eat German bananas.
Belgian chocolate.
There are no German bananas. So yeah, I mean, obviously you cannot do everything yourself. And I don't think we should be isolationists, where completely cut off from the whole world. That's not the goal. For me, the goal is to sit on the table, to be on eye level with other players, and yeah, just to taken seriously, and yeah, to be able to negotiate, to able to yeah, be on eye level with others. Mm-hmm. It's not to do everything here. So we will not have our rare earth materials here. We'll not, maybe, I don't know how realistic it is to have our own high performance chip industry here. So for me, it's not about like being everything, do everything our own, but just to be on eye level.
Yeah, thank you. And Frank from SUSE wants to add something as well. Maybe try the other one.
There we go. Sorry. There's a saying, right? Never waste a good crisis.
I was about to say that.
This is my first policy summit ever. Apologies for that, I guess. But I've had some really good conversations that are very action-oriented. People coming up to me after the talk I did on, hey, how can we collaborate together? We can do more things together. You know, Thibaut and I met afterwards as well about this. I feel very energized after today on what's possible for Europe. And I keep coming back to this. We have a good crisis. It's in front of us. Let's stop talking about the crisis and start reacting to it and just respond. I mean, we have the power as a union to do this. I'm convinced of that. So, but it does mean getting together, as you said, Frank, and do this together, right? some of the fragmentation that we spoke about before, we're going to have to deal with that, simplify things, and then we can succeed, I'm sure of it.
Yeah, thank you for bringing the never waste a good crisis, because I've been working on open source policy for quite some years, and we've been waiting for a little bit of a crisis. We've been waiting for a bit of a narrative, and digital sovereignty provides us this narrative. And I think this is the moment to actually discuss how to move from the ideas, and open source is a courageous idea. There are still many people who are not convinced. In this room, we are. But now we can move to execution. And thank you for mentioning fragmentation, because I would like to zoom in on this a little bit. I would like to ask both Franks and Ritesh, what kind of fragmentation you see as the most problematic and as the biggest barrier to moving to execution of our vision on digital sovereignty?
So fragmentation is a bit of a loaded word for me. I think in an open source construct, fragmentation is a good idea because you want many initiatives competing for the same objective. It's quite normal in open source to have 3 or 4 projects trying to achieve the same goal, and we should not strive towards having one for every type of thing in Europe. I think that's unhealthy. So from an open source perspective, I don't think there's anything wrong with what's happening there. It's how innovation flows and competitive natures are good. From a business perspective, and this has been the argument I also made in the morning, it took us 30 years to become a global company, a global entity. I'm not sure how long it's been taken for NEXTCLOUD to achieve their position, but this is too long, folks. We need to make sure that inside of Europe, we can cultivate companies of our size and our reach much, much faster. Right? I want the next 10, 20, 30, 50, 100 SUSEs and NEXTCLOUDs to be here in the next 3 or 4 years. That to me is the thing, and the EU Inc. initiative that I think was announced last week, the 28th regime, I think.
That was earlier, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't read the details on this yet, but it's very inspiring to see that level of thinking starting to occur there, so that the next level of companies will have a much easier way to navigate Europe and become a sustainable business here. So to me, that's a great initiative. Let's see how far we get with it, but I'm fully behind that.
Thank you. Frank and Ritesh, any other, what can we do to actually allow other NEXTCLOUDs for other companies not to take 30 years to achieve some kind of success and hire their first policy people? Who would like to start, Frank or Ritesh? Okay. Ritesh? Yeah.
Hello. I think the technical fragmentation mostly occurs, in my opinion, is at the interfaces level and also around the culture of contribution. So what do I mean from the interfaces? It's like if we have different API standards, when we try to implement some projects, or if we have a different security schemas spread across different EU member states, and also regarding certification, this all create a multi-cloud or a cross-border architecture very, very difficult and becomes very expensive to develop. And that's the reason if you have an open source as one of the solutions for the technical fragmentation, which builds a culture around the skills we want to develop, Most of the time, if we want to scale up, we often see the contribution in EU is mostly coming from the individuals or open source projects in the institutes or universities, but large corporations still need to speed up the contribution into one of their in-house projects back to the open source. I think open interfaces, interoperability plays a very crucial thing, which allows us to federate and also to build the skill across the EU, which we can consume across all the cloud and AI basic frameworks.
And you said that we should encourage upstream contributions. And when we were preparing for this panel, you're one of the few people that I talked to that is actually on the other side of the cloud sovereignty framework, and who actually said, hey, this is actually very useful for us to operationalize these goals and gives us a clear signal of what we need to do as service providers. Do you think that this is a step in the right direction? Is there something else that should be done that is similar?
Yeah, I think in the last year, Open Sovereignty Framework, which was recently developed by DG Connect with respect to several seals and objectives, really plays us to clear the definition of what is sovereignty. And it also allows customers to see the minimum seal levels or sovereignty objectives, which they can have the objective to select what is good for them. But I also feel that if we want to really have the successful in the sovereignty, it needs to be a base framework applies across all the EU states, along with the certification. Today, the security certification is spread across all the countries at a very individual and regional level. Yeah? If I, as a provider or the operator, needs to go to some different country, I need to do from the basic scratch and develop those standards or protocols which are required for certification. If we have a uniformity across audit and compliance certification, along with the sovereignty framework, which allow a base field for us to compete and co-develop together with other providers in Europe.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And I would like to go back to Frank. Like, yeah, if there's one thing that you would like to change from your extensive experience and success with NEXTCLOUD, what would that be?
Yeah, first a little bit, I wanted to answer a question about the fragmentation. I also think that fragmentation sounds negative, but for me this is not necessarily the case. I mean, sometimes people say, yeah, in Europe we need to have another hyperscaler like in the US, we need to have a Silicon Valley in Europe like in the US. I think we really should remember what our strengths and values are in Europe. And Europe is a very diverse continent with lots of different countries, languages, cultures, everything. And this is a good thing, not a bad thing. Mm-hmm. So the important thing is that there's an open market basically across borders, and this is like guaranteed with the help of the European Commission, of course, with regulations, which makes everything like compatible, so that companies can work together across borders. And what I find interesting is that open source is basically something actually very similar, because open source also allows contributions and collaborations across different projects and borders, because with the open source license, it makes it possible to work together, to exchange code, to stand on the shoulders of giants, with open APIs, for example, also to integrate with each other. So in a way, open source is the perfect tool for Europe to foster collaboration between the different regions in Europe, the different organizations. So for me, it's like fragmentation is not necessarily a bad thing. For me, this is also can be a strength that we have here in Europe. And yeah, but then your second question, what should be changed? I think we are already on a good path, to be honest. I'm following the discussion that's happening in Brussels about the Buy European discussion, for example, that we have a preference for European solutions, maybe for critical infrastructure or other critical components. And I think this is something that goes in the right direction. So if we make sure that the buying power, the public sector buying power, can be used for the local industries. Mm-hmm. This is a move in the right direction. And the good thing is, it doesn't even cost money, right? It's just instead of sending the money to some other continents, we just keep it for the local industry, and this is a good thing.
Buy European, but not made in Europe, or?
I mean, the details need to be discussed, right? And I'm not an expert here, and there are lots of different opinions how this should be done in detail. I'm also not a lawyer or policy maker here. Mm-hmm. But the idea that we, I don't know, use our market that we have here, we have these millions of citizens we have here, also to our benefit, is something that makes total sense. Sometimes I make the example, I mean, Germany, for example, is very proud about the automotive industry, right? So and if the German chancellor would drive a Toyota or a Tesla, people would say, what is that, right? But in IT, it's totally normal. And IT is just totally normal that we don't use like local technologies, open source technologies, but buy stuff from overseas. And this can be a big level to change that. Yeah.
Of course, buy European, but is there the supply side of things? What do we need to do to encourage that and to have companies that can actually provide that and respond to the buy European clause?
I think the supply problem is a bit of a myth, I have to say. This is partly the narrative from the big tech, from the hyperscaler marketing departments, I have to say. They're like Amazon is building huge data centers here. Look, we are spending billions here. We have all this infrastructure, so you have to come to us because we are building this infrastructure here. You know, it's not so hard to buy servers. It's actually not hard to build data centers. I mean, the European champions like OVH or IONOS, it's not hard for them to buy this infrastructure. What they need is the demand, right? Once they have customers, they're happy to invest in the infrastructure. So the infrastructure is, from my perspective, not a problem. The demand is the actual problem.
Thibaut, I was wondering if you have any thoughts to share on buy European and how to stimulate the European ecosystem and how to allow for the scaling up or just, maybe realizing that the supply is there, but like, I mean, we do have a problem. How do we solve that?
So I would want to nuance a bit what was just said, because if we look at we are working currently with my team, in preparing this Cloud and AI Development Act, and the reason we do that is that we see the demand growth in Europe, and we see the need actually for data centers in Europe, and we are not there even today. We don't have enough data center capacity. So what we really need is actually to triple the amount of data spaces in Europe and to make them also fit for AI. And this is actually something that requires land, that requires electricity, that requires organizing the permitting for all that requires the cooling systems to be in place. We calculate more than probably 250 billion euros in investment, we need. It's not something that you find just off the shelf, and you need to have a business case for that. I fully agree that there is a problem on the demand side towards the European offer, and that's, I think, something we need definitely to change, and I hope today's title, Building Alternatives, could actually be buying alternatives, because they are actually alternatives. I mean, in this panel, we have two great companies, with SUSE, NEXTCLOUD. They are European champions. But I'm wondering how many of, European CEOs or even CIOs know about them or would actually seriously consider buying from them. And that's something that we need to change, because there is a bit of a perception problem that it's not as good or it's not easy to implement. And I think also, let's be frank between us. I mean, we in Europe, we value and we want to promote open source. We are preparing actually a strategy on open source. So if you already didn't, the open consultation is still open. We have more than 1,000 replies. So it's a lot of input and food for thought. But also open source is not off the shelf by definition. It's something that you need to adjust, you need to, make to your needs. This requires a little bit of effort. And that's why, actually, if you sit in the shoes, or if you are in a C-level, you want it easy. You want safety about when you purchase things. That's what my colleague was saying the other day. There are all these criteria. And I think to break the vicious circle whereby, you don't know about the companies, you are a bit uncertain how much it costs to switch and so on and so forth, we need to have good examples. We need to show the path, and we need to just look at best practices, because it is happening. I can tell you that there is a lot of momentum these days. I've been talking to municipalities, to regions, in Germany, moving completely out of, the big hyperscalers. Big cities in Denmark, completely open source. It is happening everywhere, but it is scattered. And I think we need to learn from each other. We need to scale by showing that there is a path and there is a way to buy European that makes sense and that can be also risk-free. And I think that's what, in my role, I will try to work upon, by helping, for instance, to coordinate public procurement across regions, to help that even the small municipalities get easy solutions, to have also, tools in terms of how you write the contracts for procurement. Because the reason you were saying, why is it that sometimes it seems there is a winner designated, is because, let's be frank, whoever has designed the tender has had some suggestions in terms of how you should write it down. So I would prefer that this is coming from, the European Commission, so that it's an open and fair process. So I think this is what we can do, make sure that the diversity is a strength, because we have common standards, but also showing that it is not impossible to buy European. It makes full sense, not just for sovereignty, but actually for the money you have in your pocket.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. The session on public procurement will be later on, so I will not delve too much into this, not to take away the topics from my fellow speakers. But that was very interesting, and you talked quite a bit about collaboration and showing the examples. I used to work for some years on the Open Source Observatory of the European Commission, and very often what we heard was that it was just not that easy to procure open source if you didn't have very in-depth technological knowledge and very deep belief that this is the right way to go. So it's way easier if you have the guidelines, if you have the cooperation that shares the best practices. And this is what I would like to touch upon. So there are so many ideas on projects that can encourage this collaboration or organize it, and they have very different scopes, very different types of partnerships that they can enable, and very different types of investments that they can enable. I'm thinking here of EuroStacks, of Open Internet Stack and the NGI from the Commission, the Digital Sovereignty Edict, the IPCCIS efforts on cloud. Like, there are so many of these different ideas on how we could do this. And Frank from SUSE was telling me that even for a company like SUSE, it's a bit difficult to wrap your head around on all of the different initiatives. And I feel like on one hand, it's the necessary, not fragmentation, but the diversity of ideas and projects that can collaborate, that can encourage this collaboration. But do you think that one of them is holding more promise than another one? Is there an initiative for collaboration that you think can actually work? And I know that all of you are involved in different ways in any of them. I'm kind of opening the topic. Should we bet on something, or should we focus on the more industrial collaboration? Is my question, yeah.
I'm not sure I completely get the question, but I'll tell you a story.
Sorry.
Before I went to the policy summit, I asked Dominic, I'm not sure if he's in the room, on my team, I was in the back there. He's hosting a panel later. You should stay for him. He's the funniest guy on our entire team. So, but I asked him, can you give me like a map to all the different initiatives, bodies, institutions that I need to be aware of? This is funny coming from you also, right? But I spend my days in corporate strategy, M&A, and I screen probably 200 companies a year that I'm interested to acquire and open source. That alone is a big job to navigate. And then I come here, I'm like, you just mentioned 7 or 8 acronyms. Half of them I don't know what they do. But I know I need to be here and engage in the right ones because I care about Europe. My kids are both Dutch. I'm Dutch. I want Europe to succeed, so that's why I'm coming. But the navigational powers I need to figure this shit out, sorry to excuse the word, is difficult. Right? And I think that's something we need to really work on. Now, if you ask me, how do I then figure it out? I'm looking at the initiatives and say, okay, who's commercially behind this and why? Because it tells me as a business person, I might want to pay attention to this particular one versus its more regulatory only sort of thing. I think we can get all the initiative that we want in Europe done as long as we allow business people and companies who long-term want to establish a healthy business to get behind it and invest in it and have a path to monetization. So this is the way I dial my own navigation. Who's behind this potentially, and then I'll follow. Or, if there's no one but I believe in it, we'll start it, right? But it's hard. I find it hard, honestly.
I see. Alexandra?
If you get the map, could you please share it?
We'll open source it for sure.
That was my first thought, because I get like 10 meeting requests a day from acronyms. I think, it's somebody in that space, and I think I met that person, and it's the ETRS and the ESR and whatever. It's like, did I already meet that people? Or so if you have a map. No, I think all these spaces are totally legitimate because they involve different communities on the business side, on the regulatory side, on the think tank side. So I would never go out and pick one over the others, even if there's one that I have been a co-founder of, but I think all are very legitimate. And I think for me as a policymaker, what I would need is to see what are the demands they agree on. What is the common? And one of the demands that came out of all these spaces was the public procurement issue. This is why I think we keep coming back to it, because you don't need 3 trillion to do it. And it would be a very easy, well, it's never easy, but it is a thing that we can actually do in the European space from a policy point of view. You have the companies, you do the great work on the ground. So what I need as a policymaker is these spaces to get together and talk to each other and say, what do we agree on from a business point of view, from a policy point of view, and that's good for Europe, and that's actually a solution. So I think it's not so much about saying who is legit in that space and who should get more, who should be highlighted by someone, but how can we create a place and a time where they can get together and tell us what to do, basically. And I think that is the most important thing. And this is what the hyperscalers and the big tech companies, I mean, they have the money, they do that all the time. They have thousands of places, they have very easy ways to reach policymakers, to put pressure also on businesses, different kinds of trade associations, consultancies and all that, they do that. So how can we make sure that these people who really act in the interest of European citizens and European businesses have the space to do that and to reach the policymakers? I think that is important.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And, like I already mentioned, like I was really glad that Frank was talking about this point that they only hired a policy person, like very recently, because indeed, as open source, I feel like the technology itself and the way of collaborating on technology was kind of proving itself. But now we have to move on from the technical layer and the idea towards the execution. Something that I would like to raise as well is talent and capacity to actually influence the global ecosystem of open source. Do you see something that is the most important in order to support talent and build this capacity? Maybe Thibaut?
No, that's, I think, a fundamental question. And I was actually discussing with Frank earlier today about precisely how to make it, how to make really an impact beyond just writing nice papers or policies, And what we somehow got into, and that's something that we start working on, is the issues of skills. But not only skills, but actually the fact that today the big hyperscalers, they somehow capture you by giving you badges of honors, certificates, and through this, in fact, you become captured in one type of ecosystem. I think we should change this. I think we should also realize that there are not that many differences, in fact, between the Amazon or the Microsoft or cloud world that they are developing. It's basically 80% of it is open source anyway, and what they have on top is not something that is often complete rocket science, if I may say so. So I think we should, a bit debug, the sophistication of what is coming from, some of these proprietary solutions, and develop really the skills, the certifications, that are more universal, and that we can also plug, from day one in the schools. I mean, one of the ideas of our executive vice president is actually to start from the schools, because today you learn on, Microsoft Office. So of course, you're going to want to have the same thing for the rest of your life. But there are actually alternatives, as we know, many actually in terms of, Office treatment, in terms of messaging. So why not start from there and also learn a bit more about what it is, the basic coding is more interesting maybe than just prompts for an AI LLM. I mean, that's the kind of things we need to invest collectively into. It's a long-term agenda, but I think we can start today, right now. And I can tell you that as part of the Cloud and AI Development Act, we want to develop also a stack for schools. That's one of the projects. So I think skills. But the second thing I should mention is that yesterday the Commission had adopted some measures to make it easy for people to come and work here. So new visas, and I think that's very important. We have this policy, Choose Europe, which means actually that we want the whole world to come and work here. We want the whole world to contribute, to innovate. And we would like actually a lot of the people who are currently in Silicon Valley, 25% of them coming from Europe, to come back. Why not? Let's make good business here, and let's attract talent, and let's train our population to become even more agile and resilient.
Yeah, thank you. Let's make them come back and provide the good environment for them to be here. We have to slowly wrap up. I would like to ask each of you to share one key message from this panel, or one key message that we didn't manage to even touch upon, because I know there's a lot of topics. Let's start with Frank.
I've heard it a few times, just do it, or things like that. But I think do it. The one that stuck to me the most, and I'm just going to steal his words and repeat it, Dirk from the German speaker in the morning, become an active customer. I think this is by far the best quote that I heard this morning. I don't think we will move fast enough if we don't take those two words, active customer, to heart. You want to build more companies like NEXTCLOUD and SUSE, they're going to need an active customer who just doesn't wait for everything to be perfect, but rolls up their own sleeves a bit and gets in there and moves. Everyone can do it, right? But you got to have that, courage, I think is the word she used, to become an active customer. That would be my number one ask.
Thank you. Thibaut?
I think we need to do it indeed, but I think we need also to involve the people at the end of the line, the consultants, the integrators, that today, as far as I can see, are much too much neglecting open source. I think I would like really to be in a situation to say, okay, we have these alternatives, but we also have the full kit. We can deliver it, to you and present it in a way that will be, from a business point of view, very convincing. So I think we need also to attract these money makers or these business people to see that open source is a business opportunity.
Okay, I bet Frank has something to say about business opportunities.
I really, really need to say something about the earlier questions regarding the IT specialists here in Europe. That's something that really, really worries me a lot, is this growing hostility we have here in Europe in regards of immigration. This really, really worries me, because this is really a huge problem. I think we need to be more open and welcoming for everybody, for talent, and everybody else who needs our help. For example, at NEXTCLOUD, we are actively working together with people from Russia who want to escape the Putin regime. And this makes total sense, first of all, from a humanitarian perspective, but also from a business perspective. And it worries me that some people really think that the best for Europe is to shutting down the borders. This is really a problem.
I think that's a very beautiful segue to the democracy point that Alexandra made before.
Yeah, I would love to echo the point that Frank made, because, privately, a lot of business people and entrepreneurs tell you this is exactly what we need. We need more open borders, we need more immigration, we need all this talent, and we need to educate the people, the young people who come here, even if they come as refugees, but they're ready to learn and they're super eager to learn and to be successful. And with the policy we're having now in Europe, in most countries except Spain, who has an exceptional economic growth, for that reason, because they do that. And that's a story nobody tells in the policy environment. So I think that is a super important point. And then I would, as a value, come back to what I said in the beginning. It's about courage. Because this is also about courage, say we can do that, we are able to do that. And just to come back, because we're talking about cloud, another point where I think we will need courage, and that sounds a little bit like the contrary, but in order to keep the data that we nearly need to keep safe, let's think health data, defense data, in the Cloud Act, we need to be sure that the highest security category can only be conferred to companies who are headquartered in Europe, not because they are Europeans, but because they are subject to our regulation, to our laws, and not to the ones of another country. And this will take some courage, because there will be pushback from the US. I realize that, but that is something that we really need, and it also helps our business environment.
Thank you.
I would like to touch a little bit regarding the procurement and the tenders we have. Most of the time, hyperscalers beat us in terms of pricing. And that leads to us, okay, most of the customers in the tender, they think, okay, are you price performance? How is your security compliant? And what happens is that in order to be a competitive, we need to go in the direction of proprietary, from vertical, from hardware to software level. It would be good if we have more open source as an integral part of the sovereignty framework, like you have in Germany, sustainability dashboards, where we see the carbon dioxide. We should have something like, okay, open source contribution dashboards, where we can see how much we are independently contributing to build a culture around us. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you. I think we had really diverse perspectives on the same topic in the panel. Of course, I work in Brussels on open source policy, and I focus on this. I will very much take it with me, and I hope that we will all continue this conversation during the hallway track that is definitely a very important part of this conference. Thank you so much to my speakers, and enjoy the rest of the conference.